Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. So one of the things I am super passionate about is this idea of embodying enough in our lives. And the concept of enough is a really good antidote for this sort of amorphous, status-obsessed, be the best that you can be. And there's something to be said for, really committing yourself to something and being excellent at it because there's a good reason to. And that was a lot of what I did as a teenager. I was that straight A perfectionist, overachieving kind of student. And yet, as I've grown and matured, I see where overachieving and perfectionism and never being enough have some really negative psychological impacts. And I think one of the best antidotes to that is really spending some time coming into relationship with enough, because we don't necessarily get much exposure to this concept outside of, you are enough, which is kind of an amorphous meme statement, so it's not necessarily helpful. And I'm treating it with my engineering mind as a definite standard that can be quantified in different ways in different areas. So one of the great things that happened for me recently is I went in, and while I didn't enjoy it, I'm grateful for having access. I did the whole, being poked and prodded and having my blood drawn and, just that whole doctor's appointment checkup. And they ran all the tests and they looked at everything. And they came back and said, your blood work looks great. Your tests all are in normal parameters. And that made me really happy, because what it told me is my lifestyle choices are producing enough health. I don't get massive amounts of exercise. I don't eat a, all kale smoothie and particularly strict diet. There's this balance. I try to eat vegetables every day. I try to stay away from processed food, but it's not like I'll never have sweet potato fries with lunch, on occasion. So I'm not in either extreme. And the cool thing was I could have this quantifiable feedback where they looked at all these different kinds of things. And the feedback was, for this moment in my life, for the body that I'm in, the choices that I'm making and the care I'm taking of my body are producing enough health. And that was really powerful. That was really cool to have this, amorphous thing, because we always have these upgrades and these distinctions, and science tells us a lot of different things. And as I was sitting with the uncertainty and the unknown part of waiting for the results, I am aware that, as we get older, different things can come back. If I had come back pre-diabetic, if I had come back with high cholesterol, if I had come back with some other marker, I was just noting to myself, much as that wouldn't be news that I enjoyed in the moment, it would be really good information to have before it turned into something that had fully manifested in the body, to the point that I was experientially aware of it, to the point that I was feeling bad and going to my doctor and saying, help me understand why I'm feeling bad. And had that been the case, I wouldn't be doing enough. If I were pre-diabetic for the body that I have, for the age that I have, I would need to make changes in what I was eating and how I was caring for my body and when I was eating it and all the expertise. And if there was an issue, it would be something to do pretty urgently and with a pretty strong commitment to get to enough, because I don't want to be on any destiny paths where, the train's going to go off the tracks. I a lot of times you can look down and say, if you keep making these lifestyle choices, the outcomes are not good long term. I have so much compassion for people who are, stuck in a smoking cycle, and they may still be at threshold if they have a lot of other good practices, but overall the the destiny path leads someplace not so good if long term they aren't able to address it. And depending on their health and their body and their other choices and everything that's going on in their lives, that can give feedback for how urgent it is, how important, how much effort and resource and commitment you want to put into something. So one of the other areas in my life where I've really had the chance to be with enough is after many years of being in financial stress and struggle and worry and trying to work out the whole entrepreneur thing, I've got it dialed in so that I have enough money. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm going to quit my day job anytime soon, my day job being this entrepreneurship practice, and it doesn't mean that I have unlimited means. So when I booked the ticket to go to the UK in the fall, I was definitely not flying first class, but it's still enough money. It's enough money that I don't fret about car repairs. It's enough money that my stomach doesn't hurt when I pay the bills. It's enough money that I'm not sitting up late at night. It's sustainable, and I have enough success with earning money that I can earn it in a way where I'm not overexerting myself. Because for a lot of years, I was making just enough money working a lot of hours, which took away from life balance. I was giving up being able to spend time with friends or travel to see my parents. Not that none of that happened, but I didn't have enough of those things, what would have been optimal. Another area that may come up for you is enough beauty or enough attractiveness, or if you have stories about your weight, what is enough slenderness and enough strength, enough cardiovascular health. There's this kind of cool attainable thing, again, it's a little more tender personal topic, but I put on a bunch of weight when I first went off to college, and it was a good strategy. It was a good strategy to lessen the energetic intrusion of the sexual energy that was coming my way that I didn't know how to handle, and manage my energetic sensitivity, and, a bunch of other things. And, in terms of that, though, one of the nice things that I identified for myself, quite a while ago is I had enough sexual attractiveness. So even in this body that society would tell me, needed some modification, because there's a never too thin kind of illness in our society, I really realized, there's an abundance of sexual partners that are available to me with my body exactly as it is. So if I have reasons to change it, needing to have more sexual attractiveness is not something that's on the menu. And so there are all these different areas. And in terms of skills, I think that people can step away from things that they might want to learn. They might want to learn art or belly dance or cooking, and they're holding themselves to trying to be excellent in a class. But what if it was okay to be mediocre? What if it was okay to be so-so at something that you just got to engage with in life? You get to engage with a lot more things if you aren't trying to be excellent or a perfectionist. You can run a lot more efforts in parallel if they're not this heroic great effort of a mountain that you're trying to climb. In fact, one of the wisdoms for human behavior changes is called tiny habits, and it's a way to habitually make a change that is important to make. So, whether it's flossing your teeth or getting enough exercise or remembering to water a particular plant, there are all these ways to tie this behavior in. You can look this up. They're great TED Talks. I'm not going to go into the whole protocol, but the gist of the premise is realizing that when we have something that we want, motivation rises and falls. So if we need very little effort, if it's highly attainable, if it's a super easy thing to do, we don't need a ton of motivation to make it happen. And if you structure things where very little effort is required to make a change that will make a really big difference in your life, that's a powerful way to, to move into some of these areas where we fight with ourselves. And one of the things I was really noticing, I'm having a super fun time. I found this virtual reality game called Supernatural on this headset, which is the Oculus Quest 2. and sort of obscure and geeky, but you're batting at balloons in beautiful locations like, the side of a volcano in Iceland. And, there's great music. And for whatever reason, it's really my secret sauce. I'm super engaged. So I've been working out day after day after day for the joy of it, not because I really should. And previously to that, I realized how much mental space was taken up with I should exercise and the argument with myself. So I've had all these days where I just flowed into doing this really fun, high intensity kind of workout for the joy of it. And I got all sweaty and I got my heart rate up, and that was more than enough exercise for the day. I'd exceeded the amount of exercise I needed to be healthy. So I was set. So then I would go and I'd do my clients and my sessions and, everything else that I needed to do. And on the other side of that, there was almost this feeling like I feel like I'm missing something, because it was common for me to procrastinate and then argue with myself about a walk and then bargain that I'd go another time. And we weren't talking about anything extreme. We were talking about, getting on an elliptical and watching a movie, or going for, a walk up and down the street in the beautiful, rural environment where I live. So it wasn't that it was odious or so difficult, but there was just a reluctant exerciser aspect to my personality that was needing a lot of conversations with myself to overcome, and getting rid of the I'm not actually doing enough exercise and I really need to find a way to address that conversation has been this massive relief. There's all this space. And the cool thing is that this is, I think, really good for self-talk if you've had some tendencies to overachieve. And I'm not against overachieving, but I'm for overachieving for cause, overachieving because it's the thing that you want. One of the people that I follow as a coach for entrepreneurs was talking about watching her husband throw together a website for a business concept in a couple of hours. He had an idea, he set up a website, he brainstormed some names, he picked one, couple hours, and it was ready to launch. And she was talking about all these entrepreneurs who spend all this time on the logo and the perfect font and the beautiful web design. And there's a certain merit to just saying, what's minimum viable? What will get this out in the world? What will be proof of concept? How can I see if people really want the thing before I put massive amounts of energy into developing it? So there are all these places that this wisdom shows up subtly. There was a book at How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big by Scott Adams, who's the cartoonist who did the Dilbert cartoon. And it's this really sweet book that has this list of skills that he thinks is really necessary to have at an amateur level. If you know a little bit about Photoshop, if you know a little bit about business writing, if you know a little bit about conversation, there was a whole list. You can get by really well in the modern world. And one of his points was, don't try to be excellent at one thing. You do well to be pretty good at skills that all stack together really well. If we go back into more ancient times, there's a Tantra tradition that had just a list of something like 28 skills, 47 skills. I'm making up a number. I don't remember the exact number, but it was cooking and flower arranging and dance and conversation. And there were just all these things. And again, it wasn't like you have to be a stellar cook for an elaborate meal for a huge group of people. It's just know your way enough around the kitchen to prepare some nutritious food for yourself. Like, get enough skill in the world that you can be successful in taking care of yourself. So I don't need to be an expert at taxes. I just need to know enough to give my tax preparer the thing that she wants. I just need to know enough about how DMV works so that I can keep my car registered. There are these, I need to have enough knowledge of the internet to be able to access all the power that's there for the work that I do. And I think that we emphasize mastery, but enoughness is a really good resting place, and really getting clear about what represents enough. I think money is an incredibly powerful place to get clear about what would be enough money. What would be enough money that you felt secure and you were thriving? And one of the interesting things, I had a really fun time geeking out to the Yale course on the science of well-being, and it turns out humans are pretty bad predictors of what will make us happy, like what we believe will make us happy and what actually makes us happy, and how unhappy things make us. We're not real good predicting. You can look at lots of humans, have lots of the same story, and find that factually it's untrue. And there's a certain threshold above which more money does not make you appreciably happier. And of course, that varies. It's more money for a family of four than for a single person. It's a different amount of money if you live in San Diego area versus, some other part of the country without such a high cost of living. But after you cross that threshold, there's no correlation between higher levels of happiness and more money. And that's a really good thing to know, because I think a lot of people by default dream unlimited wealth. If only I could win the lottery. And there might be a much more attainable level that would give you appreciably the same amount of happiness. I know this sounds cuckoo, but you could appreciably be just about equally happy with a much more moderate sum of money, because it would be enough. It would have passed that enough threshold. I enjoy having vehicles that are enough. I have, older cars, but they're so comfortable compared to what I was driving as a teenager. And I was super grateful to have wheels as a teenager. And I'm glad about that, because a car with air conditioning seems like a luxury car. Wow, power locks and windows. That is awesome. There's this level of comfort and quietness and non-rattling as I go down the road that makes the car that I have very pleasing to me. And I had it in for some kind of repair, and they were going to keep it a little longer, so they generously let me have a brand new rental. And I'm driving around in this brand spanking new car, and I'm like, this would not make me appreciably happier. Having this car would not make an appreciable difference in any way I want for what I have. And that's another really powerful concept. When those longing circuits get tripped, it could be longing for, more food. Our instincts just don't have an enough switch. They never think we have enough money, safety, food, all of these kind of things. They're just more, 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 more. And that's where, if we calm anxiety and we calm our instincts, we can have a saner approach to life that isn't binge eating and hoarding and, triple locking the door and staying indoors because we're terrified to go outside. Like, you can see where the instincts running the show and just hammering away can have people never feeling like they have enough. And, that's a really uncomfortable kind of life experience to have. So one of the antidotes, in addition to calm the fight or flight, for I long for this thing that I really can't have right now. I had experiences of longing for travel during the COVID shutdown, and the kind of travel where you'd get on an airplane, and wanting for what you have is a really good antidote. So I could look around at the tree house that's on the property, and the faces of my neighbor's dogs at my sliding glass door trying to get me to come out and play, and the beautiful trees, and just the things that I love about where I live. If I'm looking at a crystal that, really isn't responsible to buy, I do not have to look far, or I can pretty much close my eyes, spin around, and look in just about any direction and be able to see an extraordinarily beautiful crystal. And I can connect to my longing for that crystal. It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. It's so unique and magical. I want it. I want it. I want it. And then breathe into having it. You could, if you feel like there's a relationship to food where there's a longing, you could take the appropriate delicious food that you're eating and really connect with, oh, I really, really, really want this, and I get to have it. There's this, way of wanting for what we have. And when I talk about enoughness, again, I want to be really specific that this is truly meant to be a measure of, pragmatically speaking, what is enough to have your life on track. So I can definitively say I currently have and am making enough money for a lifestyle that is incredibly conducive and supportive, And I'm in a really, really good place with that. I'm able to afford the things that I really need to enjoy being me. Like I love the luxury of not having a roommate other than my kitty cat, who's a different experience. And that's really important to me. And I make enough money to be able to have that. And I make enough money to take some of the trips that I really want to make. And I make enough money to put some money away for the future. So these things all really feel good. I make enough money to pay for dental work if I need it, much as I don't enjoy needing it. Sometimes that comes up. So there's an enoughness. And there were times when I really didn't make enough money, when I fretted about, paying for a dental bill or a car repair. My credit card debt was going up. I was not making enough money when my credit card debt was rising and rising and rising every year, and I just wasn't getting a handle on it. And that was a part of my journey too. So that was a time where it was very appropriate for me to put attention on, I'm not making enough money for the experience that I want to have. How do I address that? And likewise, if you have a health condition that's getting worse, you don't have enough health. It's good to put really focused energy and effort into, switching that up, and this applies to so many things. Is there enough tidiness in your house? And sometimes we want to just be good with the meantime. We're like, I have a plan to address it. I'm on task, but I am not going to have the window to really clean the house until, this point without like giving up much needed sleep. So how am I going to be peaceful in the meantime? How do I enjoy quality of life while I'm still working out, having enough money or having enough health or, those kind of things. So all for quality of life. But the cool thing about this concept of really identifying the places where you have enough, maybe you have enough friendships, so you don't need to be seeking to meet new people, but maybe you don't. Maybe it's something to prioritize. But when you start thinking in this terms of enough rather than never enough, you can be extremely strategic in your life. Where do I not literally have enough skill for what I need to accomplish? Okay, cool, growth mindset. I'm going to get on YouTube and I'm going to start learning some stuff. Where do I not have enough health? Where do I not have enough connection? Where do I not have enough opportunity? Where do I not have enough money? And the nice thing is that with all the other things where you can see where you could achieve a little more or be a little better, you can pragmatically take those off the list of mental overhead, because I think for a lot of us, there's never enough achievement. It was really psychologically challenging for some of my students to come into my shamanic journey class that, it's not like you're going to get a credential. It's just about teaching you how to connect with your guides. It's for your own growth and transformation. And I watched some of the students be incredibly challenged because there were people who were getting it faster and doing better on the very first day. They couldn't even give themselves one full day before they were comparing and evaluating. And these are some places where our brains just benefit a lot from adult supervision. Are we in the comparison game? Are we, the keeping up with the Joneses? Again, that Science of Wellbeing course, revealed that if you give people a choice between, you could make twice as much money, but you would be making half the money that the rest of the people in the office made, or you could make half the money, but you would have twice as much money as everyone else in the office. If your sort of, sense of your own well-being and your own center, those people are about half the population, and they're going to say, yeah, I'm going to take twice the money. But the people who are really in the status and the social conditioning would take half the money and want other people around them to have a quarter of the money because of what that would do for them with status. Like, that's how much it's wired into our brain. And so it's a really useful thing to recognize, have I fallen into the trap of perceived social value? I think there are lots of women who are gorgeous and stunning and have, lots of people really attracted to them who don't see their own beauty because they're comparing themselves to photoshopped models. And, the sorting for me is like, wow, I have men who think I'm absolutely one of the most gorgeous women they've ever seen, and men who are like, I'm so not into you at all. I really am not attracted to you even a little bit. And so I just sort for men who are going to reflect me in a way that I want to be reflected if we're going to get it on. It's kind of a simple, in addition to a whole lot of other qualifications that are important to me. But this sense of not comparing yourself to the best in the field. Like I have a friend who's often, will come up with some criticism for herself. Oh, I'm totally disorganized. I'm like, well, yeah, you're not the most organized person I know, but you're probably more organized than about 80% of the population. So could that be good enough? Or maybe I'm not social enough. Well, who are you comparing yourself to? What is the standard? Sometimes we have, one moment where we fumble and are socially awkward, and we don't even notice the 100 where we're socially graceful. So we're not the 99.9 percentile most socially graceful, but we're 90th percentile. We're doing plenty for sustainability. And I just think there's so much clarity in terms of giving yourself peace from mental chatter, giving yourself peace from always having some obscure performance improvement plan that you can never live up to. Like that was really my teenage years. I never felt like I was doing enough. And I'm so tired when I look back because I was getting straight A's and I was in theater protections and I was in dance and I was playing the clarinet badly at, football games, and I was in 4-H and I was keeping a herd of dairy goats alive, and I was reading about social justice kinds of things in my spare time. Like, it was cuckoo. I was up to so much stuff as a teenager, but I never felt like I was doing enough. There was this constant tension and stress state and, feelings of inadequacy and perfectionism. And it was really exhausting. I was trying to outrun something I could never outrun. And it played out well. I got into a good college and, I got an engineering degree, which opened a lot of doors and supported me while I figured out what I really wanted to do. And all of that was cool. And later in life, I'm so much more at peace. I'm so much more at peace with putting effort in the ways that matter, that will get me the results that truly will make an appreciable difference in my life. And there's a profound grace and peace and centeredness and frankly quietness. There's a way of really being in grace with yourself. And I think that quantifying what's enough, and one of the ones that I still, find that I have to keep eyes on is doing enough in the day, doing versus being. I've worked so hard to create a life that allows for being. My big longing and dream is to travel to beautiful places and to be able to just be in stillness by a river, by a tree, soaking in the magic of the land and being in the depth of that experience. Like that's the real longing that's alive for me. And yet even living in a beautiful place, given the choice between, accomplishing the next thing on my to-do list and sitting outside in a beautiful place under an amazing pepper tree with gorgeous views and playing with my neighbor's dogs on a day that I'm legitimately tired because I worked hard the day before and I don't have anything burning. I haven't promised anyone anything. It's just kind of, the next thing I want to accomplish in my head. I still really have to work with myself to go sit outside and have that balance between yin and yang. And, that never enough, there's always more you should do, I think is a narrative that we actively need to keep dismantling. And it's not like you do the work and you're completely done with it. It's an introspection when your mind pops up of you should lose weight, you should work harder, you should work out harder, you should lift more, you should put more away in your 401k, you clean up your house more, you should do those dishes, you should be of higher status in your office, you should have more designer clothes, you should have a better car, you should, whatever that voice is, being able to stop, check in with it, and see if the counsel is valid or not. Because absolutely, if your health is in decline and there are lifestyle choices that would make a really big difference, it would be really good for you to be really on the challenge and the task of figuring out how to shift that destiny path. How do I wrangle myself to do the thing that's going to put me on an upward spiral in terms of my health and well-being rather than a downward spiral? That is very, very, very appropriate to be strategically solving that problem. And I'm a big fan of help and support, because usually when something is on a downward spiral, we've been at war with ourselves about it for a long time and we're maybe a little stuck. So having someone else who can help hold the vision and see options can be really, really useful. And if you're literally not doing enough to support yourself or care for your health or tend to yourself, figuring out how to address that is very important. But being moderate is also such a kindness, so that you're not overachieving. I have people burning themselves out in corporate America and sacrificing their health because their overachiever is trying to, catch all the balls that aren't theirs to catch, and there's a power to say, what is the minimum that I need to do to not get fired from this job? And how could I just have not my monkeys, not my circus be a mantra, so that when things start failing in a corporate job where I'm just a cog in the wheel, I don't have any rewards, I'm not getting the promotions, I'm not on an upward spiral, I'm just here doing a job and I'm doing two other people's job because they're either badly organized, they didn't put corporate America together well enough in that particular company, they're overworking people and what they're trying to accomplish on the timeline is pretty impossible. Or some people just aren't pulling their weight. You end up with office workers of the person who's on Facebook all day. And can you wrangle yourself to say, I've done enough. I've honorably shown up for what they're paying me for. And I'm doing that really steadily. And if things fall apart, I'm going to have a conversation that says, well, here's what's on my plate. How would you like me to change priorities and push it upstream? Or you may want to change jobs to a less insane environment because, corporate America really thrives on these overachieving people who will put in really long hours for absolutely no reward because of the pressure to, please authority figures, the good boy, good girl, overachiever, it's a survival strategy. And if we don't learn to have a conversation with ourselves about, well, what would be the impact of working late? It's reasonable to occasionally go the extra mile, but if the extra mile becomes a lifestyle and your stress level is hurting your health, that's not a good situation. That's not super sustainable. So one of the concepts and the critical parts of enough, as I'm defining it, has to do with sustainability, has to do with staying at baseline, has to do with not having any important part of your life in a downward spiral. And beyond that, we can put things into a gentle upward spiral, and there can be an enoughness of that. As years go by, I keep upgrading my body care. I'm just in more nuance, in more balance. I have more space to think about the food that I eat and the, approaches that I take. And so, there's this gentle upward spiral of better and better lifestyle choices. But if I try to swing the pendulum in a really extreme way, like absolutely no sugar and no salt and no processed food, for some people that can be a fun challenge, a fun interrupt. But for me, I don't want to go to war with my little girl. I don't want to be in struggle. That's a loud conversation. If my health were declining, I would absolutely go to the mat for, the part of me that had a tantrum with boundaries around what is pleasurable versus what is healthy. But if I can just keep coaxing an upward spiral that gets me enough health, I don't have to fight with that. And that's much more sustainable to have working properly in the background where everything else is going on. So there are a lot of layers to this concept, but the invitation I would offer to you is to see if there's a place where you're trying for more results that take a lot more energy where something else would be enough. I remember a study course that said, hey, if it's going to take 3 times the effort to get an A versus a B, just take the B for heaven's sakes. And this was a how to study better kind of course. This was for academic achievement. And they're like, a B is fine. It's enough mastery. We think that, I'll be really successful in my career if I'm, fabulously good and top of my class. But actually, if we look at what happens, likability factors more. If you're basically competent at the job and have high levels of likability, that's going to serve you a lot better than if you're spectacularly good at the job but not particularly likable on average. Depends on certain things. If you're genius level, rock on. But for most of us, there's quality of life. And if you want to improve your likability, lowering your stress level is a really great way to do it really fast, because not stressed people are usually much better versions of themselves. And so you're going to have a lot more social graces and skill and empathy and curiosity about other humans and mutuality and flexibility and creativity and all these cool things if you're not massively stressed out. So being able to not have your head be really loud with some amorphous thing, again, we have a lot of eating disorders in our world because of this never too thin concept. Like there's never enough thinness. There are people who are literally killing themselves and struggling not to because they've internalized this kind of concept. And so I just want to invite you proactively to see where there's something that you could give yourself grace about, and not try for being the best or trying for being excellent, but just trying to be good enough, a good enough parent, a healthy enough person, a financially successful enough person, all of these kind of things, having a clean enough house, having a well enough organized kind of life. So I hope that this is supportive for you in finding some grace with yourself, and then being able to really free up energy for those areas that aren't enough, that really could use some strategic and thoughtful adjustment to get you to a more sustainable place in your life. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.